The Tasmanian devil, one of the symbols of Tasmania, and these days it is more famous for being a threatened species. The largest surviving carnivorous marsupial in Australia, an animal found nowhere else in the world, and a few months ago the seriousness of the threat to the species' future was upgraded when it was officially listed as endangered. In the last 10 years, a deadly and contagious facial cancer has ripped through the population, particularly in the eastern part of the state. The disease is transferred through biting, and animals infected with the cancer die within months of the first facial tumours appearing. Since the disease was first identified about 10 years ago, there has been a 70% decline in sightings. This has many worried that the devil might be close to extinction. Not only would it be terrible to lose such a special animal, but it would also affect all the other animals that the devil interacts with. We don't know what's causing the disease. Researchers are working on understanding how best to manage the wild populations so that the spread of the disease can be slowed while a treatment or vaccine to protect the animals from getting sick is developed. Rodrigo Amede is studying devil behaviour, information which holds a key to understanding how the disease spreads.
The aims of my particular project is to understand the ecology of devil populations, to understand the behaviour of devil populations at population level and at individual level, and to observe what the disease is doing from an epidemic point of view, how fast it is spreading, how fast it is moving, how fast it's infecting other individuals in a population. So by learning about social behavior of devils as a population and as individuals, by learning about what the disease is doing in devil populations, we may understand better how this disease is having an impact on devil populations, and therefore try to design control strategies or management actions to slow down the spread towards unaffected populations, and to try to make the populations affected by the disease to be sustainable in time. Devil facial tumor disease is a cancer, but it is an extremely unusual cancer because it's an infectious cancer, and we don't catch cancer. But unfortunately, this disease has broken that rule, and this cancer now is infectious and is transmitted from individual to individual when they bite each other. And as an infectious and 100% lethal cancer, has made the Tasmanian devil an endangered species. 12 or 13 years ago, before we knew about this disease, Tasmanian devils were absolutely common and widespread in the whole state. In such a short period of time, like 12 years, we have now devil populations facing the risk of extinction. So it is a critical issue to tackle, not only for Tasmanian devil, but for the ecological stability of Tasmania. And it is a big challenge because we cannot even stop cancer in humans. And we're dealing now with the cancer in a wildlife species, which we have limited access.
His research is one of many pieces in a puzzle.
To try to target a wildlife disease that is threatening a species with extinction requires a lot of disciplines, a lot of things to be put together. So my specific role in that sense is to try to learn about devil behavior, about disease behavior, and how those two aspects interact. And of course there is a lot of other research going, especially with genetic studies and also with immunological studies. So if we try to put all the pieces together, we might find a solution or a possible solution. Well, the science we're doing in my project has to do with behavioral ecology, with learning about animal behavior. And that goes from just sitting and observing what an animal is doing to using the state of the art of the technology in terms of telemetric equipment, using radio collars that interrogate each other. And it integrates with other research like genetic research, immunology research, the possible development of a vaccination. But the good thing of those different types of science is that at some point in time they converge, because you need to integrate that information to make sense of a broader story, of a big picture.
A recent discovery of a group of devils that are less susceptible to the disease could provide one way to strengthen the resistance of the whole population.
If we discover that certain individuals are less susceptible because they have a high genetic diversity, it means that we could try to breed those individuals with that genetic makeup with individuals from the eastern populations that are not so resistant to the disease, and therefore try to spread those genes across the entire population of the state.
The project has its challenges as well as experiences that make it rewarding. Sometimes they are one and the same.
We have to spend a lot of time in the wilderness, and we have to spend a lot of time trapping wild devils, regardless the weather conditions, for example, in places like Cradle Mountain. It is fun, but it's also very challenging to spend all day for a couple of weeks working in conditions that are sometimes not favorable, but of course that makes it more interesting. And the other challenging aspect is that, of course, this is a horrible disease. To remove sometimes females that have pouching from the wild, because they are diseased and they're going to die. They're not going to be able to wean those pups. So sometimes it's a bit sad to see animals suffering, but of course we're doing it not for the well-being of one individual, but for the well-being of the species.
Seeing devils suffer is all the more difficult when you have been there for their whole life cycle.
And the same animals that you saw with the size of a bean in the pouch of a female are now big boys that are breeding and making their own babies for the next generation. So to see that process in a population over time, it gives you a whole idea, a whole perspective of what is the life of a wild animal. To learn about that, for me, has been the most exciting and unexpected aspect of my project.
Rodrigo describes his work as one pebble to help build a castle.
To save an animal that is iconic for the state, to save an animal that is unique in the world, to save an animal that is the top predator of the island and therefore has an incredibly important ecological role for all the other animals in Tasmania. So it is very satisfying to see that with that little pebble you are doing something to keep this marvelous wildlife and marvelous environment we have in this unique island.